Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is January 17th, Thursday, January 17th, 2019. Finally getting used to saying that date. Great way to start the morning off. I see it happened to Atrios as well. Ron Fournier is in my email inbox somehow, which is amazing to me. Selling some sort of stupid Unity ticket thing, which is the point of Atrios' tweet, which is hilarious all by itself. But I just wanted to announce that I was surprised to see Ron Fournier in my email inbox. That MFer blocks me on Twitter, as I have just recently let everyone else on Twitter know. Not that I give a crap about that. No one would. I don't care what Ron Fournier has to say. But imagine the goal of blocking me on Twitter and then trying to elbow your way into my email inbox in the morning. Maybe the folks over at whichever stupid Unity ticket this is this time, Unite America, would like to think about the wisdom of engaging a spokesperson who is a Twitter dick and who nobody likes and who has a reputation on Twitter for being thin-skinned and foolish. And maybe that's not the spokesperson you need. I don't care whether he gets fired from his job. I just think it's incredibly short-sighted on a lot of levels for Ron Fournier, A, to be involved in something as dumb as this, but B, to not realize that his Twitter past is going to follow him into his spokesperson future. So F that guy. Not that I would not have said the same thing about any Unity ticket, no matter who their spokesperson was, but I just thought I'd get that out of the way first thing in the morning. Why not? Just wanted to get that off my chest. Screw that guy and everything he's working for. Thank you. And moving on, because I really don't care about the guy otherwise. Let's see. Other news this morning. I noticed somebody has let me know that there was another accidental gun discharge in Walmart. I think we're probably nearing about 70 plus that I have counted in my day. I'll have to see if I have time later on to add that to my count of Walmart accidental discharges. Just reminding everybody, one, I still care about that stuff, and two, when you're talking about the biggest retailer in America, although I guess they're being caught up to by the dollar stores, but the biggest single retailer, I think Walmart still sits in that position. If the largest retailer in America is going to allow its customers to carry its weapons, concealed or otherwise, it's just a matter of statistics. They're going to have a lot of accidental discharges. They're going to see them in numbers because they see guns in numbers. And it's probably worth adding that, a discount store is likely to, let's say, maybe draw even more armed customers than the average retailer, just because, as it happens, the gun demographic tends to be a little bit down market, let's say, and so is Walmart. I think that there's probably some overlap there. The statisticians could tell us a little bit more about that. But, it's just another one of those things. I just want to warn people. I mean, we probably don't have a great number of Walmart shoppers here. Probably a lot of listeners who are philosophically opposed to shopping in Walmart for any reason. But a good reason to add to your list is probably, if you're really looking around, like what retail outlet are you most likely to be accidentally shot by someone who doesn't know how to handle their weapon in? The answer, I think, is going to be Walmart, and we've got the anecdotal evidence to prove it. Anyway, it's just one of those things that happens. Any large organization like that has probably got an actuarial department that could tell you exactly how often they should expect to be contacted by the lawyers for customers who are accidentally shot inside their stores and sued, and about what their losses are going to be in any given year with respect to those types of suits or settlements of them. That's just probably a cost of doing business for Walmart. But imagine that. Imagine living with that, because I'm sure let's say the largest retailer in Australia probably does not spend their time figuring that out because they have different gun laws. Okay, just wanted to put that one out there on the record. Yes, it is Thursday, so we'll expect Greg Dworkin to help us round up news later on. We'll have the decks cleared for him. Armando has an eye on what's going on over at the General Services Administration. I did see yesterday, and we can certainly make room to discuss that if you like, that the General Services Administration's Inspector General has issued a report that, to no one's surprise here, and by here I mean not only in this house, but also those of you listening in your own houses or wherever you may be listening, even if you're listening in someone else's house. No surprise to any of us, it can't be, that the GSA's Inspector General says, oh yeah, by the way, just complete blatant dropping of the ball here. Obviously, it represents emoluments, both foreign and domestic, for the president to be able to continue to do business and own his hotel. And, the idea that the lease is not violated by being owned by the president and by other shares of the hotel being owned by Ivanka Trump, who's also a government employee, is ludicrous, and we don't really know where it came from or why anybody would come up with that idea. So I can get into a little bit more detail about that. But essentially, I think if I read very briefly last night correctly the conclusion of the Inspector General, it's worth noting because this sort of thing does happen a lot, and it's happening more frequently in this administration because there's more cheating going on for inspector generals to catch. But it does happen in other administrations on a smaller scale from time to time that top administrators simply either ignore or say this is too much of a headache, or are prevailed upon to simply gloss over the fact that there's a blatant violation going on, and they just are like, well, I'm just not going to do anything about it. And later the Inspector General says there's really no reason in the world why you should have allowed yourself to say that. And then everybody goes, well, my bad. Guess we'll do something about it, maybe. And then we go through some sort of administrative process that happens to just about reach ahead at the end of the person's term. And then they all say, well, there's really no point in going forward with this. And the lesson is that the next administration and the next administrators can do the same thing. And guess what? They likely will. All right. Let's see. I might, while we're waiting here, pull up some of those stories about the Inspector General's report. There's much more, of course. I guess we also have to kind of get out there on the table. I'm sure Greg brings plenty on that front. Rudy Giuliani, if he's not the worst television lawyer in the world, I don't know who is. I mean, Michael Cohen could have contended for that crown, but Michael Cohen stood his ground a lot better than Rudy Giuliani did. I don't know what's wrong with Rudy Giuliani. He went on TV last night to say, I don't even know who. I didn't watch the rest of the thing. All I know is the headlines were all blaring his one line. I never said there was no collusion. And he says between members of the campaign in Russia. I guess his main point was, I never said that Donald J. Trump himself participated directly. And I mean, I guess that's still supposed to be some sort of a defense. It's the worst possible defense. And of course, maybe nobody noticed that his biggest client has as his most frequent line, no collusion, no collusion. There was no collusion. It was a hoax. It's a witch hunt, et cetera, et cetera. What Rudy Giuliani did was go on television last night and say, I never said that there weren't plenty of witches, dozens, possibly hundreds of witches inside the campaign and now serving in the administration. I'm just saying that Donald Trump isn't one of those witches. And as you know, the way to read a Trumpster comment leads us to the inevitable conclusion here. Donald J. Trump himself did, in fact, participate in the collusion. And I suppose that's probably next week's message. Rudy Giuliani will be on. We've all anticipated him coming to the conclusion that collusion is a good thing and it ought to make one president for life. And I've always said that. It's kind of a bizarre development. I don't know what he's doing. I was going to say, why you even bother having that guy on television? Because he just is nuts and he lies. But there we actually have entertainment value. He occasionally goes on and admits things that he shouldn't, and everybody points and laughs. And then I guess eventually Bob Mueller arrests people. So good. We'll wait for that. Good morning, Greg. You believed in collusion, I think.
Yeah, well,
All along.
it turns out that Trump is not a witch. He's a warlock. And see, I was right all along, and it's just a question of using the proper terms.
Right. So they've got us on a technicality.
So Evan McMullen writes on Twitter, a predictable development in Trump's likely doomed conspiracy defense tonight. His attorney acknowledges that there may have been campaign collusion with the Russians, but Trump didn't know. And that was one of the things.
Yeah.
As this interview is happening, well, Donald Trump said, not that I'm aware of. And Rudy Giuliani says, see, I told you. He starts yelling at the camera. See, I told you. He said he doesn't know about it. That's what I'm saying. Screaming at the TV. And it was one of those, oh, my goodness. I think Don Lemon said something along the lines of, Rudy has out-Rudied Rudy today.
Yeah. I wish I had seen the
But
president's
Evan McMullen adds, the problem for Trump is that when he turns on his associates, they tend to turn on him. So if he's throwing Manafort and everybody else under the bus, what does that mean in terms of what comes next? And that's where things with Michael Cohen come in handy. A new report from the Wall Street Journal this morning says Trump hired an IT firm to rig online polls for Trump. And the funny thing about that report is the guy he hired is a bigwig at Liberty University.
Oh, okay. Well, they got wigs of all sizes there, and this is one of the bigger ones.
Why are the evangelicals so behind Trump? Well, partly because their leaders are. Why are their leaders? Well, partly because, as the story says, Trump handed the guy a bag of cash, as well as a boxing glove from a famous boxer. Nobody knows why they did that.
Oh, yeah. I'm not sure.
But I'm not sure that. But the story goes, in early 2015, a man who runs a small technology company showed up at Trump Tower to collect $50,000 for having helped Michael Cohen, then Donald Trump's personal lawyer, try to rig online polls in his boss's favor before the presidential campaign. In his Trump Organization office, Mr. Cohen surprised the man, John Gauger, by giving him a blue Walmart bag. Has to be Walmart, right? I wonder if the actuaries have a list of how often it's likely that Walmart bags are being used to hand cash to campaign people.
A
blue Walmart bag containing between $12,000 and $13,000 in cash, which of course is typical Trump because he promised 50.
Oh, is that right?
Right?
I was wondering why between 12 and 13. How much did you want to give him? Just give him that number.
I had my safe at the time. And randomly, a boxing glove that Mr. Cohen said had been worn by a Brazilian mixed martial arts fighter. Mr. Cohen disputed he handed over a bag of cash. All monies paid to Mr. Gauger were by check, offering no further comment until this morning when he said, everything I did for Mr. Trump and Mr. Trump alone. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, Mr. Gauger owns Red Finch Solutions, LLC, and is chief information officer at Liberty University in Virginia, where Jerry Falwell Jr. is a fervent Trump supporter.
Yes, and fervent Cabana Boy supporter as well.
So they say.
He just wants him to succeed in business.
Right. So, there's a whole lot of stuff out there this morning. I don't know. I can't find it. I saw this pass by. I don't know if it was for The Onion or something else, but it was a nice story about how Trump is under investigation for his Russia support. Russia is looking into just how supportive is this guy.
Yeah. We need to find out. We need to find out.
It's not nearly as much as they thought. That's why he's under investigation, because he's not doing them any good. So
they should
there's
cut
new
him
polling out. New poll during the longest shutdown in U.S. history. Key parts of Trump's base, from suburban men to white evangelicals to white men without a college degree, have slipped in their support for the president. And that's actually kind of an important story. A new NPR PBS NewsHour Marist poll finds Trump's approval rating down and his disapproval rating up from a month ago. He currently stands at 39. There's a bunch of polls putting him in the 30s now. 53 disapprove, is a 7-point net change from December, where his rating was 42-49. And the movement has come from within key portions of the base. He's down significantly among suburban men. A net positive approval rating of 51-39 went to a net negative of 42-48, so that flipped, and that's 18 points. down a net 13 points among white evangelicals, which is key. That's his true base, from 73-17 to 66-23. 66 still sounds high, but imagine if it's 66% of Republicans. Just imagine. The actual Republican number is down a net of 10 points among Republicans, from 90-7 to 83-10. You lose 10 points among the Republicans since nobody else likes you. That's kind of important. And down marginally among white men without a college degree, from 56-34 to 50-35. That's -7. So if those trends continue, he's screwed. And, it's interesting because President Limbaugh said on the show this morning that the real key here is, let me see if I can get the exact quote, Trump can win this if he hangs on.
Yeah.
All he has to do is just hold to his guns and we'll win this. It's like the old joke about, I know we lose money on every sale, but we'll make it up in volume.
Okay.
How is holding on while you're losing, and you're losing more each day, how is holding on going to be a win?
I don't know.
President Limbaugh will have to explain that because none of the rest of us understand it.
Okay.
Also, Bill Kristol points out in this NPR poll, 30% of registered voters said they will definitely vote for Trump in 2020, and 57%, 57% say they will definitely vote against him. You cannot be reelected with those numbers.
Unless you cheat.
Even if you cheat, it's just not close enough.
Well, let's say you kidnap all of the electoral college
voters
and
the voters.
Threaten their children.
Why stop at the electoral college?
Because we don't care about voters. It just matters what the electoral college does. And as you know, they're legally bound to do something. You could use some infinity gauntlets
and wipe out half the voters, and just say, okay, what we'll do is the ones that are left need me because only I can fix it.
Right, yeah. Or we can have Mark Harris's guy, collect all your ballots.
These are awful numbers for him. And there are stories that are parts of this that are just absolutely unavoidable in terms of the implication. Nate Silver wrote a story, The Shutdown is Hurting Trump's Approval Rating, but will it hurt him in 2020? And I love Nate, but this is kind of a stupid story.
Okay.
Except he saves it at the end. He says the glib answer is probably not, and that's because if you look historically, shutdowns don't hurt you. But there's nothing about precedent that really helps you here. And he goes on to save himself by pointing out the shutdown may have frayed Trump's relationship with the Republicans in Congress, to which I add, you think. And then the shutdown has prompted Trump to double down on his all base all the time strategy, and yet he's losing his base.
Yeah.
So, no, this doesn't help his reelection at all. And the idea that it will only have a marginal limited effect because that's the way shutdowns have worked in the past, that assumes that there's anything about the Trump White House that is like the past, which it is not. So, those kind of analyses kind of fall flat. This is NBC News this morning, first read. Meet the Press. Yes, the shutdown has taken a toll on Trump. First read is your briefing from Meet the Press. So I guess it's the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
And the NBC political unit on the day's most important political stories and why they matter. So this is Todd, Mark Murray, and Carrie Dan. I read it because of Mark Murray. So we guess the buck doesn't stop with everybody after all. A new NPR PBS Marist poll has the president's approval at 39, down from 42. Gallup has it at 37, down from 39. Q poll has 41, up from 39. Pew has it at 37, down from 38. CNN has it at 37, down from 39. It's down a tick or two. That could be just noise, but the bigger point is that we're talking about the high 30s for the most part, and the high 30s is not a place you want to be. They go on to say that's an approval rating average at 38. And just in case you wanted to throw in Rasmussen, Trump's favorite pollster, they have it at 43. That's significant because they're usually at 50. Compare that with the fall of 2018 when most polls show president's job rating in the low to mid 40s. So don't let the reality of his numbers rarely changing distract you from the clear evidence this shutdown has chipped away at Trump's numbers.
Even they say that. Even the moderate, both sides, first read.
Right. So even the moderate, both sides New York Times says, if you don't believe these numbers, maybe you'll believe this. We're getting crushed, Mr. Trump said. He told this to Mick Mulvaney, the guy who's going to collect 5 different unemployment checks. after watching some recent coverage of the shutdown, according to one person familiar with the conversation. Now, if you're talking to Mick Mulvaney and you're quoting to one person familiar with the conversation, I wonder who that might be.
Well, could have
Why
been
can't
any
they get
of
a
the
deal,
10
said
Mick
Trump.
Mulvaneys.
Also, Mr. Trump told him he believes over time the country will not remember the shutdown, but it will remember that he staged a fight over his insistence that the southern border be protected.
It is possible that no one will ultimately remember the shutdown. No one seems to remember Newt Gingrich's shutdown, but actually everybody does. So
everybody does, and they also remember Newt Gingrich got canned over it.
Yeah.
But this next line is the good one. He wants Democrats to come back to the table agreeing with his position on a wall, and he doesn't understand why they haven't.
Can't find the table. It's a very small table. You're going to need a bigger table. That's the problem. You should work on it.
Well, he keeps
Spend
moving
all
the
your
table.
time on it.
And part of the whole framework for all of this,
made
which
of
is just so
F-35s.
weird, and the thing I will never get used to, is why haven't the Democrats folded as kind of a subgenre of the Democrats in disarray fanfic that the media writes all the time?
Yes.
They seemed totally stunned by the fact that the Democrats are not in disarray. They're pretty unified on this. We talked yesterday about the, I don't know if you went over this with Joan, but the Problem Solvers Caucus went over to the White House yesterday morning after the day before random moderates refused. The Problem Solvers went over and basically told the president, you have to open the government.
That's it. They've solved it.
That's how you solve the problem.
Thank God.
I said yesterday on the air, they have to go.
We need a new
they
Einstein.
can't not go. It's in their name. They're problem solvers.
Einstein's
so they went
for our
over there and they
time.
solved the problem.
That's right.
Just
You need to
open the
solve
government.
this. That's it. They found the guy who needed to solve it and told him he had to do it.
Which, of course, gave me no respect for the Democrats and the problem solvers. I mean, that was perfect. So the White House was left with, okay, we had a good discussion. What else are you going to say?
We solved problems. That's good. What they have for lunch?
Right, but the point is, it's not working for him. It's not working for him politically. It's certainly not working for him in terms of helping the country in any way, shape, or form. He's not getting his stupid wall. And yet, the media just doesn't seem to understand that. And they just keep, I don't understand why the Democrats don't compromise. That's the way out of this. Well, why don't you take the approach that I don't understand why Trump doesn't say this is a stupid wall and I lost? Because that's the way out of this.
Yeah. I mean, they said there was an
They
election.
never do that. They never do that. So it's on the Democrats, the grown-ups. They're the ones that have to compromise in order to open this up. But that's not going to happen. It is a stupid wall. And Nancy Pelosi started to talk about that because the news was just coming in on the show yesterday as I was leaving about Pelosi suggesting that maybe you should give your talk in your basement.
Yes.
Rather than the people's house, because you're not necessarily invited until the government is open.
Right.
And there was all sorts of stupid stuff on Trump World about, this is a great opportunity. He can give another Oval Office speech. It's even better. She's making a huge mistake. Or, as Ben Brody from the CBN, the religious network said, Pelosi is playing checkers and Trump is playing chess.
Yeah.
But, that shows a complete and total misunderstanding of Trump's communication skills. He's great when he has an audience. It's interesting. It's reality TV. When he's not got an audience and he's reading from a teleprompter Don is boring.
Yeah.
And he loses more of his own base when he does that than when he doesn't. So the idea that he'll make up for not having the State of the Union with people standing up and applauding him on the Republican side, he's going to make up for that with an Oval Office speech. It's just the dumbest analysis I ever heard.
Yeah, it's not going to work. I talked about it a little bit yesterday that the dynamics of a speech with an audience are completely different, and it's why the response falls
Especially
flat
for
every
him,
year.
but you're absolutely right.
I mean, for anybody, it would fall flat. The response always looks stilted and stupid and boring and makes people want to turn it off.
It looks like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer.
Yeah, right.
Answering a Oval Office speech. We saw how that works.
Yeah.
And they had the right of the substance, and it didn't matter.
And, I mean, punditry is aware of this. I mean, every year, well, so long as it's Democrats giving the response, they love to remind everybody that the response is terrible, and it's usually like a Sports Illustrated
Pelosi
curse.
and Schumer got better ratings, though. So
incredibly, yes.
Analysis went out the window.
That's how bad Donald Trump is at set-piece teleprompter speaking. I mean, his weekly radio address, which no president really gets any attention for, but it's repeated evidence that he's not getting any better at it. He's awful.
Right.
He's awful. He thrives on the live audience.
He's so bad.
He lies, but
did worse than the response. That's how bad it was.
Yeah.
I totally get that. I think you're right.
Oh, then we're
done. So what happens is, she's got him. And I don't think there's going to be a State of the Union unless he opens it up. And if he opens it up, then what? So does he open it up on the day of the State of the Union so he gets to give it in the House?
Yeah.
Or does he open it up on the day of the Michael Cohen hearings because Cohen's going to tell everybody about all the crap that Trump did in order to try to get himself elected?
Yeah. Well, maybe he'll want to use something to distract from it. I wonder, though, I wonder what they would do, actually, if he opened it up the day of or the day before the current date that they had selected, January 29th, because, her point was that it takes weeks to get things ready properly. So, the answer there normally would be, well, no, it's too late. But the optics of saying no after the government opened that morning, I wonder what might be a good play there. But, I suppose it's something he could recover from if he breaks all the rules and decides to do a rally instead of a State of the Union, and no one's going to hold him to account if he does that. Oops, we got the wrong one here. There's the music we wanted. So
I thought we were starting over.
Yeah, we are. Why don't we just wipe the slate clean? Maybe we should just take that bell to make good points every time we say something right. And I don't know how he's going to deal with this, but it'll be interesting to watch. I understand Stephen Miller was all upset because he was writing a big attack piece as State of the Union, and now he won't have that play. So we'll just check back in and discuss more after this. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Greg Dworkin is still with us, and all right.
You sound so disappointed when you say that.
Yeah, I remember. Sorry, everybody. Greg Dworkin's still with us, so let's see if we can get rid of him.
But he's still here.
Get back to the good stuff. Okay, yeah. I think this week is wearing on me. It says I can't believe it's not Friday already, but most people feel that way every week. Yeah, it's the old joke.
I felt that way on Monday. So I got this great article to cheer you up. This is from Garrett Graff, who's a security analyst over at Wired, and he does some really nice pieces. And the title of this one is "Trump Must Be a Russian Agent. The Alternative is Too Awful." It would be rather embarrassing for Donald Trump at this point if Robert Mueller were to declare that the president isn't an agent of Russian intelligence. We've reached the point in the Mueller probe where there's only two scenarios left. Either the president's compromised and has been working covertly to cooperate with Vladimir Putin, or Trump will go down in history as the world's most famous useful idiot, as communists used to call those who could be co-opted to the cause without realizing it. At least the former scenario would make him seem smarter and wilier. The latter scenario is simply a tragic farce for everybody involved.
Right. So there better be some money behind this.
Yeah. So what do you think? I think, that it's what is it? Hanson's law.
Oh,
Never assume malfeasance when the proper answer is idiocy and
I think
incompetence.
he's a hybrid.
And so there's something about that. Is it Occam's razor or is it Hanson's razor?
It's Gillette's razor. I understand
Well,
this creating a lot of problems. I don't know. I don't know if I understand that one, but I think it's a hybrid. I think he's somewhere in between. I think that he thinks he's not working for them, like I'm an agent of Russia. He doesn't work for anybody,
right? Or as I saw it put, if you love what you're doing, it's not really work.
Yeah, I guess there's that. That's it. That's an excellent point, and it might really make a lot of sense in this context. He gets money. He's been very open about, I like people who say nice things about me and or give me money, and I make a lot of money with them. I don't make moral judgments about people and the rightness of their causes. If they pay me, I'm for them.
Right. And so Trump can be a Russian agent and incredibly stupid and inept. Right.
Yes.
They're not mutually exclusive.
Somebody in the world is the dumbest Russian agent they've got. Just has to be true.
Somebody has to be. Right. Walmart has statisticians who look at that. The actuaries can tell you.
Right. They know approximately how many Russian agents shop in Walmart in any given year.
And who's the dumbest? Right. So this other one I think is also really good. It's from Yoni Applebaum. It's from The Atlantic. Impeach Donald Trump.
Yoni.
Starting the process will rein in a president who is undermining American ideals and bring the debate about his fitness for office into Congress where it belongs. And I'm all for that. When people say impeach or impeach now, that's not exactly what they're saying.
Oh.
It's not as if you have to take the vote tomorrow.
Okay, that is true.
Right? What it means is start the process, and the process can be a lengthy process, and it could be a detailed process, like the Mueller report.
Sure.
So if you're all for starting the Mueller report immediately, it may take a couple of years to get the result, but you got to start somewhere, and to put it off is dumb. Start it now. So let it do its job, let it be thorough, let it be done properly, but let it start.
I can't disagree. I mean, I won't.
Oh, okay. So it's not a partisan judgment, Applebaum says. Many of the president's fiercest critics have emerged from within his own party. Even officials and observers who support his policies are appalled by his pronouncements. And those who have the most firsthand experience of governance are also the most alarmed by how Trump is governing. The damage inflicted by President Trump's naivete, egotism, false equivalence, and sympathy for autocrats is difficult to calculate. That was John McCain. The president has not risen to the mantle of the office, says Mitt Romney. And they're just being used as examples of people in their own party who aren't thrilled with Trump. We'll discuss less about what they did and more about what they said at the moment. So more troubling still, Trump has demanded that public officials put their loyalty to him ahead of their duty to the public. On his first full day in office, he ordered his press secretary to lie about the size of his inaugural crowd, something we should not forget. He was a proven liar from day one. He never forgave his first attorney general for failing to shut down investigations into possible collusion and ultimately forced his resignation. I need loyalty. I expect loyalty. Trump told his first FBI director, then fired him when he refused to pledge it.
Yeah.
So these actions are in sum, and he talks about some of the other lawless things he's done, are an attack on the very foundation of America's constitutional democracy. And Trump's actions during his first 2 years in office clearly meet and exceed the criteria to trigger the fail-safe of impeachment. But the U.S. has grown wary of impeachment. The history of its application is widely misunderstood, leading Americans to mistake it for a dangerous threat to the constitutional order. I would say Steny Hoyer has the same misunderstanding about censure. Right?
Yes.
He goes back and he says, you can't do this because it's important.
Well, that's the job.
Actually, this, what Steve King said is important. So, yes, you should do it.
Right.
Oh, by the way, just a side discussion there. So after Steve King had a resolution that Steve King voted for that said Steve King's principles are wrong.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Then there was a move by Bobby Rush and Tim Ryan to talk about censure. And I guess they wound up combining their thought. And what eventually happened is James Clyburn talked Bobby Holt into sending it to committee, to ethics committee. where it would take its
rush,
proper time to ripen.
Yes.
And the thinking was, that's a mechanism for getting rid of it. It's like tabling something. Yeah. And the reason that Clyburn is doing this is he doesn't want censure to wind up being a weapon about everything that everyone says outside of Congress that might be controversial. For example, impeach the MF.
Yeah.
That's a recent example of how they don't want censure to be used by whoever wants it, whichever party against the other party. So there's something of an argument to be made there. I'm not saying he's right, but that was the thinking. And so the conservative thinking institutionalists may wind up winning on this one, and censure may not actually come out, at least right away, with Steve King.
Maybe. Yeah, there's a lot of problems with that, but it's a thought. It's worth entertaining briefly before moving past it, I think. I mean, it's true you don't want to use censure for everything, as a weapon against what might otherwise be considered free speech. But we're back to the, should you punch Nazis question, which we really sort of
I mean,
settled.
what if a guy stands up and says, I really think the South should have won?
Yeah. I mean,
100 years ago, and I'm for them, and I'm really sorry that the other side won. What are you going to do with a guy like that who's elected?
Yeah, right. Although at that point, I'd
why don't you censure him?
13th, 14th, 15th, which amendment is it? And say, oh, we have a real problem for you. You need to swear loyalty to the United States, or we boot you. I mean, the amendment won't apply directly to you because you didn't actually fight in the Confederacy. But there's this thing we have here.
Being the non-lawyer, that's finding a reason to do what you want to do. Right? And you want to censure the guy because of what he just said, and now you'll find a reason, and it turns out you're going to pick one of the amendments.
Yeah, those are supposed to be good reasons.
It's a great reason, but the point is you already decided you needed to do this, and now here's the mechanism by which we're going to do it.
Okay.
I mean, Steve King needs to be censured.
Yeah.
It's your problem, Mr. Young staffer, to go find out what you're going to use as the source and cause for it. That's not my problem. He needs to be censured because of what he said.
Well, I mean, it may end up just being, I guess, what a Steve King supporter might view as a nuance problem. It's if you censure him, then they may bring a censure motion about impeach the MFer. Now, of course, the answer to that right now is who cares? We're the majority. One wins, one loses, and I'll let you choose which one you think is going to win and which one's going to lose. But
I would ask the person who thinks that that's worth censuring to please document which of the words you're troubled with. Is it the? Is it impeach? Or is it that other word?
Yeah, and of course, whereas, I guess let's think about what's the substance.
Because if it's that other word, here's all the other examples where it's been used and nothing happened.
Yeah, or what's the substance of what was discussed in this free speech? I don't say that he can't say it. I just say that there's consequences of various kinds that come from. One is discussion with one profane word included of a constitutional process, and the other is the discussion of a most unconstitutional ideology, white supremacy. So how did that become controversial? Well, it's unconstitutional, fought a massive war over it, more Americans died over it than any other, what do they say, casus belli, than any other in history, but I can't really set the two apart otherwise. One is asking for a congressional process to begin, and the other is for the systematic suppression and possibly murder of an entire race, or maybe a couple of them, because of the numbers of them that are not white. So I don't know. I don't know if I can make a difference between these two things. Both sides say things.
I'm just really trying to make the larger point that when there's something that needs to be done, you can always find institutional reasons to do it or not do it, depending upon where you're coming from. And that certainly is relevant to the discussion of impeachment. I mean, in this case, I think Steve King's remarks clearly need to be addressed. You can argue whether censure is the right way to do it, but they clearly need to be addressed. In Trump's case, what he's doing to subvert the rule of law clearly needs to be addressed, and you can argue whether impeachment is the proper way to do it or not, but it clearly needs to be addressed. And for Trump, the bigger argument on the table is, do you wait till 2020 and do it at the ballot box, with 57% of the public saying that they would definitely not vote for him? That's certainly likely to happen. Or, and by the way, if you leave him in office, you don't get President Pence. Or do you push impeachment, and then without a guarantee that that's going to happen, particularly because you know you don't have, at the current time, the votes in the Senate. But the argument for doing impeachment, again, is that it's a process. And Yoni Applebaum and others are making the argument that, look, if you do impeachment, what that really means is starting the process of explaining to the public what it is that Donald Trump has done and why such a maneuver, such as impeachment, is relevant. And get over 1998. The House impeached Bill Clinton for the wrong reasons, and that's not the precedent that you need to look at in terms of how this process works. You need to look at how the Constitution is written and what it was originally meant to do when you have somebody who is deliberately trying to subvert all of the rules and norms that put you in office in the first place.
Yes. Well, okay. I mean, you may even have an obligation to overwrite the poor lesson of 1998.
Yeah.
So, I'll show you how it's really done.
Pelosi and her antediluvian leadership team served in Congress during those fights 2 decades ago, and they seem determined not to repeat their rivals' mistakes. Polling has shown significant support for impeachment over the course of Trump's tenure, but the most favorable polls still indicate it lacks majority support. To move against Trump now, Democrats seem to believe, would only strengthen the president's hand. Better to wait for public opinion to turn. This is the received wisdom on impeachment, the overlearned lesson of the Clinton years. House Republicans got out ahead of public opinion and turned the president beset by scandal into a sympathetic figure. But instead, Democrats intend to be a thorn in Trump's side. But Congress can't outsource its responsibilities, and they can't outsource the responsibilities of federal prosecutors. No one knows when Mueller's report will arrive, what form it'll take, what it will say. We don't even know if we're getting a Mueller report at all, I will add. Even if Mueller alleges criminal misconduct on the part of the president, under Justice Department guidelines, the sitting president can't be indicted. And the new incoming attorney general to be, likely one, says that he's okay with that. So will the host of congressional hearings fulfill the branch's obligations? The view they will offer of his conduct will be both limited and scattershot, focused on discrete acts. Only by authorizing a dedicated impeachment inquiry can the House begin to assemble disparate allegations into a coherent picture, forcing lawmakers to consider both whether specific charges are true and whether the president's abuses of his power justify his removal. Waiting also presents dangers. With every passing day, Trump further undermines our national commitment to America's ideals. And I think all of that's true, by the way. To me, if you step back and look at the bigger picture, Americans don't react to details. They don't really care about policy prescriptions so much as they do the overarching storyline. And if you don't write the story in a way that Americans can understand it, they're never going to get the big picture. So the whole point about impeachment is that it's a process that allows the Democrats, just like Senator Sam, back in the day, could tell a story about Richard Nixon and why he needed to go. And it's really, really helpful to do that. And when you have hearings that are televised, it's so much better looking at the hearings. As flawed as they are, it's so much better watching the hearings than it is watching the talking heads on cable TV talk about what these issues are, with point, counterpoint, argue, disargue, so on and so forth. Have the hearings, educate the public, and then at the end of the hearings, you can take the temperature of the room, so to speak, and see where you need to go. Yeah,
and if you need to go further, the hearings can go on longer. You run them.
And so there's no downside to that. I don't understand why they don't just do it.
I don't know. Both sides, possibly?
I don't know. So Applebaum writes, Democrats' fear that impeachment will backfire on them is likewise unfounded. The mistake Republicans made in impeaching Bill Clinton wasn't a matter of timing. They identified real and troubling misconduct, then applied the wrong remedy. Clinton's acts disgraced the presidency, and his lies under oath and efforts to obstruct the investigation may well have been crimes. The question that determines whether an act is impeachable, though, is whether it endangers American democracy. As a House Judiciary Committee staff report put it in 1974 in the midst of Watergate, the purpose of impeachment is not personal punishment. Its function is primarily to maintain constitutional government. Impeachable offenses, if found, included undermining the integrity of the office, disregard of constitutional duties, an oath of office, arrogation of power, abuse of the government process, adverse impact on the system of government. I think, you can make a case for Trump right there.
Yeah, I would think so. I don't know why at this point you wouldn't at least begin making that argument to people inside the House. And this is a great start for it. And the argument that you need to bring public opinion around, I think it's already happened. And the evidence that it can happen further is even Rudy Giuliani thinks there was collusion now, and he's supposed to be the defense attorney here. So I think the time is now.
Right. Well, but again, you could argue that's a little bit shotgun. Did you see Giuliani or not? You know who he is or not. But what Applebaum writes, I think, is true when it comes to the big overarching story and narrative that you're trying to tell. Once an impeachment inquiry begins, the president loses control of the public conversation. Andrew Johnson, Richard Nixon, and Bill Clinton each discovered this, much to their chagrin. Johnson, the irascible Tennessee Democrat who succeeded to the presidency in 1865 upon the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, it was a unity ticket, don't forget.
He was never
Lincoln
on
was
TV
a Republican
again.
And Johnson was a Democrat. Quickly found himself at odds with the Republican Congress. He shattered precedents by delivering a series of inflammatory addresses that dominated the headlines and forced his opponents into a reactive posture. And then when impeachment was launched, changed everything. Day after day, Congress held hearings. Day after day, newspapers splashed the proceedings across the front page. Instead of focusing on Johnson's fear-mongering, the press turned its attention to the president's missteps, to the infighting within his administration, all the things that congressional investigators believed he had done wrong. So the coverage changes. And Trump is easily the most pugilistic president since Johnson. He's never going to behave with decorous restraint. But if impeachment proceedings begin, his staff will redouble its efforts to curtail his tweeting. His lawyers will counsel silence. His allies on Capitol Hill will beg for whatever civility he can muster. And his ability to sidestep scandal by changing the subject will diminish. So that's a pretty powerful argument for why you should do it regardless of the outcome.
That is true. If you can becloud his administration, you ought to do it.
Yeah. So I think it's a pretty good article. The previous one by Dave Lenhart in the Upshot over at the New York Times argued about why Trump deserves impeachment. But this one is more of a framework of, from practical points of view, how the impeachment process winds up helping America. And I think it's a great piece.
Yeah, and it does. I like the subtle shift of, does what he did really deserve impeachment? It's not about him. It's not about deserving, and it's not punishment. If you think there's something happening that undermines American democracy,
you're obligated to fix it.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
You can change your mind. Yeah, at the end, if you say, all right, well, that removal from office might not be the remedy, but we've developed a record here of what all the problems are and what we think maybe the better remedy is, and wouldn't we be better off there at that point than we are now, scratching our heads?
Right, absolutely. And that is independent of the Mueller report, although it could always incorporate the Mueller report if the Mueller report actually comes out. So that's my pitch, and hopefully I've convinced you it's a good idea. Not that you needed a lot of convincing, but there's the argument for it.
I'll take
and
it.
Thanks so much for listening, and you out there in podcast radio land, thank you for listening. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my good friend David Waldman. Kagro in the morning.
Yes.
And you got the rest of the show. I'll be back on Monday, and I'll talk to you then.
Very good. Yes, thanks very much. We'll carry this into the weekend. Thanks, Greg. And thanks to Yoni Applebaum. Yoni Applebaum, smarter than the average Applebaum, as it turns out. Or that's Yogi. All right. Is there another Applebaum out there? I think there are. There are plenty. That's the problem with you Applebaums. All right. Well, let's see. I'm on offer for our 10 o'clock hour is a discussion with Armando about the General Services Administration Inspector General report with covering the complete mess that the GSA has made of the very obvious emoluments problem at the Trump Hotel. And I think we ought to catch up with that. So let's reserve further discussion of that until then. Look, we've already got an announcement. He's already hired a PR department and put it out there on Twitter. At 10, I'll be discussing the Inspector General report on the rank incompetence, to be charitable, of the GSA regarding the emoluments enabling lease violating Trump DC Hotel with me on our show. And so stay tuned for that. And all right, what else have we got to go on here? Let's see. Plenty of other stories. Of course, let's turn back to Pocket and pick out another couple of them. I don't have... Oh, I should have asked Greg for this one while we were on the air. There's a Wall Street Journal story that I guess digs into further, I guess, the background of a story that Greg did mention. This is, I guess, where the story of the Walmart bag full of money and the boxing glove actually came from. I don't know whether there's anything else to mine out of that story beyond the fact that it happened and that it was done in order to buy positive, rigging of polls online and positive news coverage. Although I do think that there was another detail in there, if I saw correctly. Maybe this was a side deal that Cohen had with them, but apparently he paid for a the Liberty University connection. Greg reminds me. Yes, that's true too. Nearly forgot that one. But I think there was a story in there somewhere about Cohen also paying for some, I don't know what, like a bot network or who knows what, to sort of spread the meme online that Michael Cohen was a huge sex symbol, which is amazing and brings us back to the wider point, which is that everything is a sex cult with these people after all. All right, yeah, I have the Wall Street Journal link. I just couldn't get the text because it was paywalled. But here's a couple of the excerpts here, right? So we can read you at least the nitty gritty details. We heard about the $12,000 to $13,000 in cash. This was when early 2015. The man who runs a small technology company showed up at Trump Tower to collect $50,000 for having helped Michael Cohen, then Donald Trump's personal lawyer, try to rig online polls in his boss's favor before the presidential campaign. So, of course, Rudy Giuliani and others will say, you can't worry about this because this was before the presidential campaign, and two, you remember Trump's excuse here, when he gets caught lying. It's not like I was lying to some high tribunal. I was lying to the press. Nobody cares about that. And this is his real estate developer con man coming through here. He actually doesn't believe that there's anything wrong, probably nothing wrong now in his mind, with just simply lying to the press. Although you might be able to convince him that as president of the United States, that's more unseemly than it was as a real estate huckster. But I'm sure that in early 2015, neither Donald Trump nor Michael Cohen had any problem at all saying, well, what's the big deal? You're rigging some online polls. What's a poll? Nobody believes polls really anyway, so what's the difference? Everybody knows statistics can be misleading, so we'll rig one up. What's the big deal? And there's no law against it anywhere, and I think they might even be right about that. So I'm sure they went ahead and did it for that reason. It looks like maybe we got some more of the text here, so let's keep reading. Why not? See what other details we can pry out of this. In his Trump Organization office, Mr. Cohen surprised the man. Surprise! John, what did we say his name is? Gauger? Gager? How does he pronounce it? Gauger. By giving him a blue Walmart bag containing between $12,000 and $13,000 in cash, and, randomly, a boxing glove that Mr. Cohen said had been worn by a Brazilian mixed martial arts fighter, Mr. Gauger said. So gross. That's all sweaty and stuff. And I guess the idea was he was a famous guy, and maybe was it autographed or who? I mean, who would care about this? Interesting also, between $12,000 and $13,000 in cash. A weird number altogether. 12 and 13 is a weird place to land. The fact that it wasn't 13, but it was more than 12. I mean, didn't somebody count this? Do we not know what the exact number was? And did Michael Cohen get $13,000 in cash and then dip into it and say, I'll take a couple $100 for spending money for myself and just give him the $12,000 that's left? Hilarious that he was supposed to collect $50,000 and he only got 12 and change. hilarious that it was in a Walmart bag in the movies. Like, you could never get that past, the producers if that was your script. Enter Michael Cohen. He's carrying a blue Walmart plastic shopping bag filled with cash for the bribe. And you'd be like, no. It needs to be, a metallic finish suitcase, and he puts it on the desk, and he opens the locks, and he opens it, and Gauger looks at it, and Michael Cohen gives him a cheesy line about, go ahead, count it. No, I trust you. And he closed the case right now. It's in a Walmart bag. And you look at it, what's this? Just a little something from me to you. It looks like cash, although it looks like about a third of what you owe me. Yeah. And also, there's a bottle of Cialis in here. Oh, give me that. I meant to pick that up at the pharmacy for a friend. Whatever. There's Preparation H wipes in here as well. Do these belong to you? No, I shouldn't have used this bag. What the hell is he doing? Anyway, Mr. Cohen disputed that he handed over a bag of cash. All monies paid to Mr. Gauger were by check, he said, offering no further comment on his ties to the consultant. That's not really helpful. Then there was the connection. Red Finch Solutions, his company, and he's chief information officer at Liberty University. And apparently, Mr. Cohen says he can't get the information right, so maybe he's not a very good one. I don't know. Or maybe he's great at what he does for Liberty University because they have to lie all the time. I'm not giving him a job evaluation. I'm just saying, no one really knows what to make of this guy. And they're both liars, and I don't know who's telling the truth in this one. All right, we got a break coming up. Let's give one more paragraph here. This was the funny one. During the presidential race, Mr. Cohen also asked Mr. Gauger to create a Twitter account called Women for Cohen. Why? I don't know. The account, created in May of 2016 and run by a female friend of Mr. Gauger, described Mr. Cohen as a sex symbol, praised his looks and character, and promoted his appearances and statements, boosting Mr. Trump's candidacy. All right, hang on, Armando. We'll be right with you. And for the rest of you, we'll be back in 1 minute's time. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Armando is with us. I have to conclude with the exciting Michael Cohen sex symbol story. It says here, Michael Cohen... Oh, this is an interesting ending here. So, when Mr. Cohen requested the $50,000 reimbursement for technology services, he didn't tell Trump Organization executives what specific services were performed, because, they don't have accountants there. And they didn't ask, because they don't care. People familiar with the matter said. Now, is it, I guess what I'm not getting out of this is, Mr. Cohen asked for a $50,000 reimbursement. Was the $12,000 to $13,000 that he gave him in the Walmart bag, was he fronting that and asking to get reimbursed, I guess? Or it doesn't say when he asked for reimbursement, or did he say, I need $50,000 to pay Red Finch Solutions? Did he get that money? And did he then make the decision to give $12,000 or $13,000 to this guy? And what did he do with the rest? I'd love to know the timeline on this. I'd love to know whether Cohen asked him to to throw in the Women for Cohen thing as a freebie or some sort of premium. Or whether, Mr. Trump wants this. Mr. Trump wants this. I'd love to know how that worked out. And I love the no honor among thieves angle here. Do this for me, I'll give you $50,000. All right. In that case, sure. I mean, it's stupid and I don't think it's going to work. But okay. All right, here's your money. Hey, you said you were going to pay me $50,000. Oh, yeah, sue me for it. We're thieves, idiot. What did you think you were going to get? That's pretty amazing. I'm surprised that there wasn't a bomb in the bag as well, or in the guy's car on the way out, or that they didn't hook up a fishing line to the bag and yank it out of his hand on his way out the door. Well, that's Trump world for you. Meanwhile, it's all being aided and abetted by the United States federal government. We'll turn now to the story of how the General Services Administration just decided it would be okay if Donald Trump, the biggest liar in the world, were able to rob the world blind under color of law and violate the Constitution in so doing. And everybody just said, boy, Constitution violating gives me a headache. Let's just not talk about it. I don't know what the hell happened because I didn't get a chance to read the report. Armando did.
I did.
I'm assured it's astounding. It had
It
to
is
be
astounding. It was always astounding. And David, just to recap, since January of 2017, this show, and you and I in particular, have just been livid by the decision of this contracting officer for the GSA named Terry and the memorandum he issued at the time, which was simply ridiculous. I don't know if you recall that memo, but I can tell you it did not discuss the emoluments issues or constitutional issues. It actually hinged on interpreting Section 37.19 of the lease in the most ridiculous and, frankly, just shameful fashion that I had to assume the guy was corrupt. But apparently, and as you'll find out when we discuss the GSA's response to this report about how pleased they were that there was no undue influence, it was just merely Mr. Terry's a complete incompetent idiot. Therefore, we're very proud of this report from the IG.
Okay.
Seriously.
Why not?
It's shocking, the response. But, the headline has been, and there literally is a headline here that says GSA ignored the Constitution. GSA's reasons for ignoring the emoluments issue. That's been the headline. That's the news. It's the news particularly because I think the Inspector General actually went out of his way to discuss the emoluments issue and show that, in fact, the lease, without some modifications, would violate the emoluments clause of the Constitution. Much of this is actually in court, of course, now in two courts in New York and in Maryland. The Maryland case is proceeding with discovery. And you could just look at the 3 or 4 pages of analysis of the emoluments issue and see that Trump is screwed if a court is honest on this issue. It's not limited to what you describe as your profits or anything like that. That's not how it works at all. That's not what it meant to George Washington, and that's not what it means today. I'm going to put that aside because there's just parts of this that are shocking. Yes. I'll start with the constitutional issue because that's the headline. I actually think the contract issue is much more interesting, but the GSA IG, the Inspector General for the General Services Administration, says here, and they have a heading. It's called this: GSA's reasons for ignoring the Constitution.
That's what they did, and here are the reasons.
As described above, by mid-December 2016, above they'd sort of give a narrative of what they said, oh, no, he's going to win. Now what do we do? Oh, no, he's the nominee. Now what are we going to do? And they kept putting their head in the sand. And I think, like Comey, they thought he'd lose, and they wouldn't have to think about it. But he won.
Could be.
So they said, as one senior attorney told us, the OGC senior attorneys, I guess the OGC is the attorneys for the GSA, decided to punt on the issue. They weren't going to. And this is the Inspector General saying, we conclude the decision to not deal with the emoluments issue was improper for several reasons. One, as a federal agency, GSA is subject to the Constitution. Imagine having to write that line in a report.
Well, yeah, ordinarily that would be bad. It's just, remember, you're working in the context of cleaning up after a decision that the president isn't a federal employee. So you have to restate everything.
It's another part of it too, but said, which also is incorporated into the lease. That is, there's actually a clause in the lease that says that this lease and everything you do must comply with all applicable law. And obviously, as the Inspector General said, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and it applies to all federal contracts.
Yes.
And he said GSA had said part two. GSA, this is the second reason it was improper. GSA already had determined that the Foreign Emoluments Clause bars a federal employee from doing business with a foreign government in his private capacity. This is an interesting point, and let me tell you what they're talking about, rather than read the 40 pages to you. A actual GSA employee opened a real estate agency as a side business. And he got an opinion from the GSA's ethics people saying, okay, you can do this, but remember, you can't do any dealings with any foreign government because you're a federal official.
Okay.
In your little real estate business. Now, here's a guy who's probably, a broker doing rental apartments to people in Georgetown or wherever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they have an actual opinion that says, reminding him that, okay, you can do this, but you can't do any dealings with foreign governments.
Right.
But when the GSA is reviewing the lease for the president that the President of the United States is a part of, they say, well, we're not going to look at the emoluments. We'll look at this poor schlub down in a cubicle over here, and we're going to remind him he can't have any dealings with a foreign government. But we're not going to actually look at the issue when it involves the actual president of the United States.
Right. Well, that guy's scary, and the other one isn't. Is what it might come down to. Well, of course, it may also just mean that the guy in the cubicle, what we're saying to you without telling you, wink, wink, if your LLC rents to foreign governments, that's fine.
Oh, my God. Wait till I get there.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know that was in there. All right.
Yes. And then the third reason that the Inspector General offers for why this was wrong is they ignored the Office of Legal Counsel's binding legal opinions on the emoluments clauses, even though the Office of General Counsel's for the GSA's responsible attorney knew that OLC issued opinions involving both President Reagan and President Obama. That is, they knew these were binding on the president, and that there was very clear, direct law and opinions to look at that they should have applied to the lease. That is, they purposefully said, I'm not looking at this.
Sigh.
And then they went even further and said, well, okay, I'm not going to look at what happened, nor am I going to go ask the Office of Legal Counsel to tell me what to do.
Okay.
Even though they knew the LLC did these things.
Right. That's their job.
Because they didn't want to be told that they had to cancel the lease or modify the lease. Now, people should be fired for all this. I mean,
yes,
in all
sure.
aspects of this. These are fireable offenses, in my opinion. But you'll see what the reaction to GSA is at the end. All right, so they said they ignored the emoluments issues because, well, we don't really deal with that very much. That was their story. They also said it's not for us to evaluate those things. Okay, well, who is it to evaluate?
I don't know. The big story underlying all this, by the way, is if you ever think, well, I'm sure there are high-level government experts who know what they're doing dealing with this, the answer is a lot of times these are people who, on this issue, like they say, they never dealt with emoluments before. These problems don't come up for these guys. They don't deal with it very often. But
that's not true,
they
though.
Don't.
See, in this case, they had dealt with it with a schlub down in the cubicle.
Yes, that's true. I mean, but when it comes to president stuff, when they deal with this stuff, there's not going to be a newspaper story about the schlub in the cubicle. When a big deal happens and the president is involved and there's going to be news, it is very often the first time in a 35-year career in government service that anonymous Mr. Whatever from Arlington, Virginia, has an important decision before him that requires thought, and he's become rusty if he was ever able to perform that job, and has instead been like, look, man, I just want my 401k to look good, and I'm almost out of here. That's who's running most things.
He should have punted it to Jeff Sessions' Justice Department and let them do the whitewash.
Right. They may have said, you do it. We don't know what we're doing.
Well, there's no indication that they actually asked.
All right.
That's
well,
what I don't get. Because, okay, say you're afraid to do it because you're worried about your 401k. I completely understand that.
yes, or a thrift savings plan in their case. They don't have 401k. Okay.
You punt it. You throw it to somebody who's going to make a decision that's going to get attention, and then there'll be a big deal about it. When the GSA, David, when the GSA contracting officer said this is okay, you know what the reaction was in the media? You and I went ballistic. Nobody else said, well, I guess it's okay then.
Right.
They don't know it's some poor. They don't think of him as some poor schlub who's holding on to his 401k. They thought, oh, this is a responsible guy. I mean, this Mr. Terry, why is he going to do this? I mean, Trump must be okay on this. That big pile of blank paper must have meant something.
Amazing.
So no, I'm not as forgiving of that guy as you imply I might be.
Oh no, I don't mean you. But
I think the easy thing would have been to just punt it to the OLC, and I think that's what the Inspector General sort of thinks too.
I think that sounds like a reasonable thing to do. All I'm saying is that the vast majority of like truly anonymous government functionaries are just biding time. They are not. They're not our top.
They're not
men.
looking for a fight.
Yeah, and they're not particularly qualified necessarily to do what they do. They just do what I did yesterday. Just keep doing what I did yesterday and the day before until I retire and I'm out of here. Something difficult comes up, either if a smart one will punt it to someone who's got responsibility and might know what they're doing or could take the heat, and a dumb one says, it's just like everything else, man. Nobody's going to look. Stamp. Move on.
Yeah,
there's a lot of that.
I mean,
and you got to look out for it.
Is GSA knew what it was doing. They didn't want any part of it. And now they look like idiots. I mean, here's what the Inspector General almost seems compelled to write. He writes, the notion that GSA can disregard selected parts of the Constitution fundamentally ignores Article 6 of the Constitution, Clause 2. And Article 6 establishes the whole Constitution as supreme law of the land. This is, basic civics, right? And therefore it governs every agency. As an executive agency of the United States, both GSA and its employees have an obligation to ensure that agency actions comply with the law, whether the lease incorporates the Constitution or not. Using the language some witnesses employed, the Constitution most certainly is in GSA's purview. Moreover, the lease by its very terms contemplates that the laws will be considered even if they are not specifically included in the text. For example, Section 6.2 of the lease prohibits tenants' use of the premises, quote, for any purpose or any way, quote, that violates the applicable laws, including the Constitution. This provision has little meaning if GSA cannot rely on those very laws because they are not stated verbatim in the lease. And Section 37.2 says federal laws of the United States govern. It's, obviously ridiculous. And they knew it was ridiculous.
Yep.
And they just didn't. Your point is right. I'm just some guy. I don't know. Why are you sticking me in this? I just do my normal check the box stuff, and you're putting me in the middle of this.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of that goes on. And I think that, like you stated, that they were confronted with this really fairly obvious problem. And it was like, oh, my God, what are we going to do? This is a huge issue. It says right even in, forget emoluments, it says in the lease that you can't be a government employee and lease the old post office for any purpose. And now, and when we signed it, he wasn't a government employee. This is classic. Great. This is a great test question, for law school. What happens? Well, it would be an easy one. For Michael Cohen's law school, it's a good one.
It would have been an easy one under any circumstances, but it's actually particularly easy, and the Inspector General's analysis will show you why even that stupid, almost idiotic dodge of creating the LLC is complete nonsense.
Yes, we haven't gotten to that one yet.
I have not gotten to that. But
thinking
that's,
in terms of
actually the most important part. And by the way, just to me, the constitutional analysis actually has to include whether you think he's the person benefiting from the lease, which is really the purpose of that clause anyway. I think they're actually one and the same, but be that as it may. The Inspector General really was mad about them saying that we're not going to look at the emoluments issue because they had this 2013 guy in the cubicle situation,
Okay.
where a GSA employee, not just some federal, a GSA employee sought a waiver to participate in an outside real estate company in the Washington, D.C. area in 2013.
Now, that's interesting. Just that he sought a waiver. All by itself, the fact that he sought the waiver is pretty amazing. Not that they got it right, but that even this guy who got the adverse decision said, this is so obvious a problem. I just want to go into a side business. But it's so obvious a problem that even a cubicle dweller like me will get caught if I go out there, on my own doing this business. The emoluments clause will cover even me. So I better seek a waiver.
Exactly. And look at the responsible attorney for the GSA's, its in-house lawyers, wrote a memorandum, and the inspector general quotes from the memorandum. It says to him, be aware that because you are requesting to conduct business in the Washington, D.C. area, you are beholden to the emoluments clause, which states, by the way, you'd be beholden to it anywhere in the United States, but obviously the feeling is it's going to be much more of an issue because you're in D.C.
There's more people here
and
who
they
have
quote
read
the
it.
emoluments clause about no title, nobility, blah, blah, blah.
Except for the Attorney General.
And they conclude, therefore, you are prohibited from doing any business with any country. And parenthetical, for example, any transaction regarding an embassy or residence. That is, people who are here for foreign countries, like ambassadors from Saudi Arabia and their 800 retinues of people.
Yes.
Can't come. You can't come and rent rooms for them.
Right. You would be taking money from a foreign.
You're prohibited from doing that. You can't have a hotel and rent 2 floors of your hotel to a bunch of foreign dignitaries. That's an embodiment problem for you, guy in the cubicle.
Yeah. Well, simpler for something like that. You can't, if you flip houses on the side, you can't sell one to the Saudi ambassador.
Exactly.
That's all. Okay. And you got to be careful because in the ordinary course of business, with no intention whatsoever of taking bribes from foreign countries, you're just, look, man, I bought a house and I'm selling a house. That's all. Yeah. Okay. Just be aware. Be careful. You got to know because of the other job you hold, you need to find out who's buying from you and be sure it's not a foreign government. And if it is one, hand the business over to a buddy or something. Sell the house to, I won't give you that advice. They didn't even bother with that. Just don't sell to foreign governments and you should be okay.
That's exactly what they said to him.
All right.
Now, I think they should have said you can't deal with state government individuals,
yes,
but that's actually, I was wrong when
clause.
I first thought that, because that actually goes to the president is the one who can't do that.
Okay.
In fact, it did, but it got better.
All right.
And the inspector general, you can see the steam coming out of his ears.
Yeah.
The emoluments guidance OGC provided in 2013, OGC again is the in-house lawyers, comports with the instruction that they received from OGE, the executive office. Shortly before the election on September 23rd, 2016, the executive office of GSA issued a legal advisory to all executive agency ethics officials on post-employment restrictions. The instruction included restrictions on employment or compensation from a foreign government for certain civilian retirees who remain subject to the emoluments restrictions as current employees. This is a month before the election. They told me, remember, you can't be doing any work with foreign governments.
Right. Okay.
So it's not like they didn't know.
That's true. So they do it all the time. And the guy wasn't caught having forgotten to seek a waiver. He affirmatively sought one because he suspected going into it that there might be a problem. And he was right. There is.
All right. And then the inspector general goes through what, for now, to me at least, is familiar analysis of the emoluments about basically covers everything and everyone. And he says they ignored what everybody knew because you knew it because you already said it twice. And then he wraps them for punting by not actually punting, because a punt implies I took the ball and I punted it to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, you could give it to the OLC, the Office of Legal Counsel of the Justice Department. But they didn't do that. So he says, wait a second, you didn't punt because you kept the ball. If you had punted, you would have done it to the OLC. Give me an opinion, please, on what I need to do.
Right.
They didn't do that.
So that's a good play. You should try that next time your team has to punt. Take the snap and then just put the ball down right where you get it and then tell everybody, look the other direction and wait for the clock to run out, and you could win the game.
Now, here's what's interesting about that. 20 years ago, according to the Inspector General, the office, the legal office at the GSA had a similar problem.
Oh, what?
There was 2 members of Congress who were involved in one of these real estate trusts, and they were buying 6 entities, and it involved potential leasing and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And what did the GSA do that time?
I assume they decided correctly that they couldn't do it.
No. They punted. They punted
right.
by actually punting to the OLC.
Right. Okay, all right.
And asked the OLC for their opinion.
Okay.
And the LOC gave them an opinion and said, okay, we can do it, but you'd have to make this change and that change and make sure this doesn't happen and make sure that doesn't happen. So they knew how to actually punt.
All right. That person, whoever that now retired guy probably is. But, that's the job. You're supposed to look and see what happened before. And even the clock watchers know that you're just supposed, if you don't want to get in trouble, do what they did last time.
So clock watchers should have just done what they did the last time. They wouldn't be getting basically publicly embarrassed in this way. If they had just said, we're going to go tell OLC to decide this issue. It's too big for us.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, they say, well, these are monuments issues. That's beyond our ken. That's too much for us. Okay, so give it to somebody who it's not too big for.
Yeah.
I would love to just sit and I'm sure the guys from the Inspector General are like, why didn't you just? Can you imagine that conversation? They're saying,
Yeah.
All right. I know this was hot. You didn't want to touch it. Why didn't you just punt it to OLC? That's what you guys did 20 years ago.
Yeah, and I guess you have that discussion, and after a while, you have to end it because there's a person at the other side of the desk who's like, I don't know, now I wish I had, but I didn't.
Yeah, but there was a lot of people involved, lawyers too.
Yeah, and you fire the guy at the end, but you have to end the conversation like, I don't know how to impress this upon you in a way that
I hate to be brutal about this, but these are firing offenses.
Yeah, no, you're right, but I'm imagining, you say imagine the conversation. I'm imagining it. For me, it goes on to the point where I'm like, here's the thing, I don't think I'm getting through to you about how serious this is. Oh no, I understand. I wish I had done the other. Well, I need you to leave my office in tears or something. What am I supposed to do here? I don't think you get it. I mean, I'm gonna fire you. You've got to go. You blew off everything you were supposed to do. You don't get big bucks as a government employee, but the bucks you get, that's why you get them, and then you didn't do it.
Right? Just pass the buck.
So admit it. Right?
I mean, to me, I think, okay, you're scared of this and you're scared of that, and who knows? Mm-hmm. Pass the buck.
Right. We have a mechanism for that. You wouldn't
have
had this problem.
We have a buck-passing mechanism right here. You've used it before. Do it again. Now, I know we're coming on the break, but I would ask everyone to stay tuned if you care about this, because now I want to talk about the provision in the lease that prohibits elected officials from being admitted to the lease, which is Section 37.19, which this part is really astounding. It defies belief how this was. I'll just start with what the argument was.
Okay. We do have a minute if you like.
It starts with what you said, which is Donald Trump said, look, I'm not going to be on the lease. I'm going to form this LLC, which I will own, and I'll put them on the lease.
Yeah.
As if that would solve the problem.
That's all. That's the only thing that he did. By the way, does the lease say elected officials or government officials? I'm just curious.
It says no member or delegate of Congress or elected official of the government of the United States or the government of the District of Columbia shall be admitted to any share or part of this lease or to any benefit that may arise therefrom.
I guess my question essentially there was, does Ivanka Trump, as part owner of the hotel, have an emoluments problem? She's not elected.
She does for different reasons. But
okay,
not
good. We'll get to
she
that.
She has an emoluments problem, but not a lease problem. That's why I think you should look at the two things differently.
Okay. Yes, that's right. Good. We need to differentiate between those things. I guess I need to look at the emoluments language, but I guess that question has been answered. We'll be back then in 2 minutes to continue with this astounding story. Stay tuned. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption, though it's still aimed at saying thank you to all of you who are supporters of the show. We've made a lot of progress. When we first started this campaign, fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners were donating to help keep us on the air, and now that's down to about 1 in 15, but we've got a long way to go. Remember, it won't take much. Our average monthly donation is currently about $7. For which you're getting 2 hours of great news and entertainment 5 days a week. What's that, 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal. But as a wage, well, I think Democrats would be against that. But if we all put our 70 cents together, or even half of us, that'd really be something. And my kids could go to college. Now, that's not all on you. But remember, patreon.com, Patreon.com, is there to make it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X, or David Waldman, or Kagro in the Morning, or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box. And you'll be right there where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your continuing support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show for our last segment here on Netroots Radio for the day. Armando's still with us, and we might as well reiterate the point that you were making to me during the break, in case there's anybody out there that isn't getting it. He's absolutely right. He says, I'm not sure I'm conveying how outrageous this whole thing is. I think you're doing an excellent job of conveying it, but we'll just state for the record, all of the things that we are talking about are, in fact, hugely outrageous.
Really
Thank you.
I just
everything that guy just said is outrageous.
It's just a lawyer who sees how outrageous this is, but it's just outrageous.
They really, they had the clearest instructions in the world and every mechanism available to them at their fingertips, and they laid down for no reason and without justification of any kind, not necessarily because they loved Trump and wanted to take a bullet for them, but because they were dumb and don't even know how to handle something out of the ordinary. I mean, if you're working for the government and there's a legal question and you can't figure it out, and your legal department can't figure it out, there's a big legal department that handles everything for the government. There's a list of phone numbers on your desk. Call it and say, what do I do? And instead they said, I might get caught. I might not get caught. It might be my fault. It might not be my fault. It's Friday. Just say it's fine and see what happens. And as a bureaucrat, for your own self-interest, that was the worst possible way of handling it. The fact that the democracy is at stake
These guys
only
are
makes
all
it
going to
worse.
be called to testify in front of the Cummings' committee now. And they're going to get taken through every stupid thing they did. And they're going to be embarrassed on national television.
Yes. And it was an easy call, and I can't believe it.
Just say, OLC, you decide. You tell me what to do.
Right. I don't know what I'm doing. You do it. Okay.
You
You're right.
do it.
You
guys make more money than I do. You decide. And they would have decided in Trump's favor, and there would have been a big to-do about it, and a New York Times story, blah, 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 but they didn't do it. Anyway, here's the part that gets even worse. And it starts on page 20 if you're following along with the report.
You need to send me links, by the way, to all of these things you're reading so I can give it to everybody else.
I actually linked it in here. Let me
we can take care of it later. Don't worry.
Yeah, I mean, it talks here about the and it's funny the way the Inspector General frames it. He doesn't want to say that they're reading contractual interpretation is just incompetent. Here, and watch this phrase. We found that when the attorneys for GSA considered how Section 37.19, that's the the restrictions, the prohibitions language that we've talked about, should be interpreted. They employed the standard tools attorneys use for interpreting language in contracts, statutes, and other legal documents. They said they employed them correctly. They just say, well, they made a sort of waved at those tools. And then they said, but we found that OGC did not, however, analyze the Constitution's foreign and presidential emoluments clauses as they affected Section 37.19. As a consequence, they left the decision to the contracting officer, that's that fellow Terry who wrote that terrible memo, who granted tenants' request for an estoppel certificate that leaves a constitutional cloud over the lease. I think there's a complete legal cloud, and we'll talk about remedies. Mm-hmm. Now, what's funny is in the first paragraph of the analysis of Section 37.19, they say OGC, that's the legal office for GSA, determined, and it's redacted. Now, the redaction is, that's legal advice, so it's privileged. Okay. But I don't think that claim is going to hold at all. I don't think there's a privilege there that's going to hold at all. But in the meantime, it's redacted. They made this determination, blah, blah, blah. I assume they determined that the clause didn't impact Trump, which is funny. And you'll remember Terry's analysis in the memo, so I think that's basically what it's going to say there. And then the primary clause we've talked about, the no members or delegates to Congress or elected official of the government of the United States, the President of the United States is an elected official of the government of the United States, shall be admitted to any share or part of this lease. That is, he could hold 1% of this lease.
Right. So,
and he did.
You read that and you go, shoot, I can't believe this. Right?
All right. Right. So they did two things. The issue largely turns on what the term admitted to means. And then it started with Trump argues admit means to allow entry under current dictionary definitions. Consequently, the argument goes President Trump was admitted to the lease before he became an elected official. Therefore, the prohibition doesn't apply.
Right.
Okay, however, GSA couldn't even punt on this. They had to say, recognize, and there's blocked out stuff. Moreover, their March 3, 2017 memorandum to Terry said, and that in revising the applicable law, Congress removed the word admitted for the express purpose to conform the understood policy, intent, and purpose of Congress to the original enactments with such amendments and corrections as will remove ambiguities, contradictions, and other imperfections. That is, that little argument has already been foreclosed by Congress. Oh. So that argument did never even argue. Okay. So this is the argument that Trump was left with. The second issue arises with the proviso that creates an exception to the prohibition in the primary clause. That's the exception argument. That is that, however, these are how we get out of it. This is the LLC argument. That's why you formed your Twitter LLC, so that
no one can hold me responsible.
Right, that you can't be responsible, and it doesn't apply to you. That's not your Twitter account; it's your LLC's Twitter account.
Right.
So the primary clause, it says, the proviso states, provided, however, this provision shall not be construed as extending to any person who may be a shareholder or other beneficial owner of any publicly held corporation or other entity, if this lease is for the general benefit of such public corporation or other entity.
I see.
So here's the argument. You've heard it. Okay, obviously, it's not a publicly held corporation. The Trump organization is not, and none of his LLCs are publicly held corporations. But it is another entity.
It is that.
So the argument is publicly does not modify other entity.
Okay.
Publicly held does not modify other entity. Only the word corporation. So the restriction allows for shareholders in IBM and any LLC you happen to form. Now, maybe it's because I'm a lawyer, but this is such a ludicrous interpretation that if someone came to court with it, you'd get sanctioned as a lawyer. I mean, you can't make that argument. Of course, publicly held corporation, the publicly held part applies to other entity. It has to. Otherwise, there's no purpose for the passage here, the excerpt. Mm-hmm. Why have it? All right, well, okay, well, I won't form a publicly held corporation to hold my lease. I'll form a private LLC instead. It's stupid.
Right.
It makes no sense. And of course, the tenant applied the grammar rule to this, and the grammar rule doesn't actually apply. And then here, the Inspector General cites 8 million cases why this is the most ridiculous argument in the history of arguments. They cite a Supreme Court case from 2001 on statutory language and many other cases. It would render the phrase insignificant, if not wholly superfluous. It would render it nothing. It would make it a nullity. Now, one attorney told us GSA needs to change the clause moving forward. They actually wouldn't, but we're in Trump world, so now to avoid stupid Trump arguments, you do have to deal with it.
Okay.
Now, just remember, Terry accepted that argument. I'm going to take you back to something that's not in here. Terry accepted the argument. Terry, who was the contracting officer, said that, no, it's okay, it's an LLC, and it's especially okay because Trump's not going to get the money. He says he won't pull any money out of the LLC until after he's out of the White House.
Right. Well, no one. Yeah. Okay. You weren't supposed to believe that, but he did.
Yeah, but Trump's making the benefit. The fact that he's leaving it in a bank account, doesn't change anything.
No, I'll just put your bribe over here. I'll pick it up later.
I'll pick it up once I'm out of the office.
Yeah, but tell me how much is in it, and then go.
Right. So, the Inspector General says this is wholesale nonsense, and and off we go.
Yeah, well, okay. That's not supposed to even come close to working, but for whatever reason, because they didn't want trouble, which is an amazing thing because there was a much better way to not get trouble.
Let's just punt it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the Inspector General finishes up. He says, okay, here are my recommendations. Stop using this language in the lease because you're too stupid. He doesn't say that. These are my words. Because you're too stupid to understand them. Let's use actual words that a kindergartner could understand because you're too stupid to understand anything that's more complicated than that. So they said change the language. And they say they should have considered whether the foreign emoluments clause, etc. And while we think that that's all wrong and they shouldn't have granted the estoppel certificate, they say that the decision-making process included serious shortcomings, and they said, okay, you need to do better. Don't do this again. They need to do a formal legal review that includes consideration of the process and fix your language. And it says here, and it's a response to our draft, GSA agreed with our recommendation. Now, I read the response to the draft, and I don't think they did. And if the Inspector General thinks the GSA agreed with their recommendation, in theory, they're going to go back and look at the lease and determine whether it should be canceled.
Okay.
I don't think that's what the GSA did. And it's Appendix B to the report. It's one of the most shocking and embarrassing, in my view, responses that I've ever seen.
Okay. Let's hear it.
Let's hear part of it. And it's just I got to get there.
Okay.
And it says, it's to the Inspector General, her name is Carol Ochoa. It's from Jack St. John, the General Counsel for the GSA.
Hi, Jack. Good to hear from you.
Evaluation of GSA's management and administration of the old post office building lease. And he says, this is in response to your final report dated January 4th.
All right.
The analysis and findings contained in the report primarily involve actions taken by the OGC, that's the Office of General Counsel, and according to the Administrative General Services, asked me to provide the agency's response. OGC appreciates the opportunity provided by your office to engage with our evaluation team prior to receiving the final report. as well as the professionalism and courtesies extended to our office. All right, here's one of the most, I think, appalling lines in the history of government. The GSA is gratified to learn that following a rigorous 16-month investigation, the agency's concerted efforts to ensure that the contracting officer was able to render an impartial decision free of undue influence of any kind proved successful. He's been exonerated. The GSA was exonerated, says the GSA in response to this Inspector General report.
I see. Like
we
Giuliani.
note that after interviewing over 2,000 employees and reviewing over 10,000 documents, your office found not a single instance in which a political appointee or career federal employee at GSA attempted to improperly interfere with or exert pressure on the contracting officer's decision-making process. In fact, your office found no undue influence, pressure, or unwarranted involvement of any kind by anyone, including the Executive Office of the President and the Office of Management and Budget. This is a clean bill of health. We are wonderful. Look how great we did, is the GSA's reaction to this. Now, here's the classic next line that you will not believe. The report's primary findings relate to actions that occurred either during the previous administration or prior to the confirmation of the current administrator. This is Obama's fault.
I mean, the lease was signed under, I mean, I guess that's what he's trying to say, right? The lease got signed under the Obama administration before Trump was president. That is true. And then what? I mean,
for example, the decision not to address the emoluments clause occurred in mid-December 2016. The decision not to seek guidance from the LLC began in the summer of 2016. And the decision to grant the estoppel certificate occurred on or before March 23, 2017, when career officials were acting in the administrator, deputy administrator, and general counsel positions. This is Obama's fault.
Yeah, great.
Any commentary resulting from the report that suggests the agency took any action to protect the president's business interests is therefore plainly meritless. We are wonderful. Thank you for telling us how wonderful we are.
I mean, well, it's amazing that the reality that it ignores, of course, besides, okay, come on, enough now with it's Obama's fault stuff. But, I mean, wouldn't the real problem for the employees and the reason that they should have punted was the position you're in 2016 in evaluating all this stuff is Trump is about to either become a non-factor in interpreting these clauses if he loses, or a prohibited person, but a prohibited person who's in a position to make your life miserable and possibly ruin you if you speak up about what this really means by winning the election. So if your gamble is he's going to lose and the problem's going to go away, and he does lose, you're fine, but only because no problem was ever created. And the other possibility, why wouldn't you do something to help yourself in all of this and say, if somehow, and granted, for a certain part of 2016, nobody believed that it was even worth entertaining, that the idea that Trump would win. But in December of 2016, you then scramble to do the work that you ignored for the rest of the year because that stupid eventuality has come to pass. And I realize I have done nothing about this, even though it's been sitting on my desk. The punchline of, oh my God, what if Donald Trump wins and all of a sudden it's the president of the United States who owns, who's the party to this lease. And so all I have to do is my job. I got to sign the lease of the old post office. Someone somewhere is the world's foremost expert on that contract. Not that he's
David,
competent to the job, but okay, we better
it gets
leave room
worse.
for
I'm
it.
getting to the last two paragraphs of this.
All right.
This is the current head of the GSA's legal department. Listen to this paragraph. We also note that the report, despite its lengthy historical analysis of the emoluments clauses, does not find that any constitutional violations occurred. What?
How could...
But the Inspector General said they agreed with their recommendations, which is shocking to me. The apparent purpose of that analysis, as well as the report's discussion of certain OLC precedent, is to support the proposition that an emoluments violation is merely possible. Actually, it goes further than that if it leaves the conclusion to you. But wait, he has a conclusion. With regard to that point, the agency respectfully refers you to the publicly available filings submitted to the United States Department of Justice in various litigations regarding the emoluments clauses currently pending in federal courts around the country. Those filings, as you will see, cite the very OLC opinions referenced in your report to support DOJ's position that the old post office lease does not violate the emoluments clause. Oh, so you've already redecided this issue that you never even looked at? Well, good. I'm glad to see you're going to be objective and unbiased now and not be unduly interfered with by the White House in your position on this. Sarah Sanders could have written this. This is a no collusion. The Democrats colluded with Putin.
Right, or the Giuliani, the previous round of unbelievable Giuliani TV pronouncements. All this is exculpatory.
It's all exculpatory. We have been proven not to have done anything wrong. And in fact, you're the ones who are doing everything wrong. Okay, and in terms of the recommendations, which is why I think the Inspector General's last line in his report is just completely misleading and a problem. They say, in conclusion, the agency agrees with the report's single recommendation and will take action consistent with the recommendation prior to continuing to use the language of Section 37.19 of the lease in the future. The agency appreciates your continued assistance in identifying ways to better deliver value and savings across government services. Please feel free to contact me at this number. I feel like calling this guy and saying, you are scum. You are
do that if you
scum.
want.
But this problem is not solved. I hope Elijah Cummings knows this and calls this guy and says, how can you possibly have written this response to that report? His name is Jack St. John. He's a Trump appointee, and he's a MAGA hat, and this is a disgrace, and all of them should be fired, and it's and that contract, that lease needs to be canceled, and someone needs to do something about this immediately. There is a constitutional violation that is being countenanced by the federal government on behalf of the personal interests of Donald Trump and his family, and someone needs to do something about this.
Yes. I mean, the hearings ought to be heated, to say the least. It's amazing that, I mean, but I guess, I don't know, maybe it's par for the course over at GSA for them to just say, well, you know, what if we just declare this matter settled in our favor and see if anybody notices? Well, you know, someone will notice. Yeah, but it might be just
nobody's
a
noticed
schmuck.
yet. I'm actually a little upset with Cummings on this. He should have had a press release. I mean, Jerry Connolly came out with something, but I need to hear Cummings. He's the Oversight and Government Reform Commission. He should have had a press conference on this.
Yeah.
Donald Trump is being bribed by foreign governments as we speak through payments to his hotel.
Mm-hmm.
T-Mobile.
Right.
Story came out the same day.
Mm.
This is outrageous. We've got to do something about this.
Now, I mean, that should be top of the list for Cummings, and it's a disappointment that he hasn't.
He's doing
done
He's
it
doing
so
Cohen
far.
today. I know that's fun.
Yeah,
but
there's
this is
more
actually
things.
a thing.
Yes.
This is a thing. This is a thing that is right what the government Oversight and Reform Commission should be doing. It should have had a hearing on this like tomorrow.
Yeah. They won't get to that, but I imagine there's a staffer somewhere who has read the story and said, all right, we need to respond, and it'll be the staffer will draft up a response. They'll do it. I mean, the fact that there isn't more hair on fire in that office is a little worrying, but they do tend to move slowly. But
they have 8 million things going on, and
yeah.
I know no one thinks this is the biggest fire. And I thought it's the biggest. To me, it's the most outrageous thing from day one of this administration. And I felt like, aha. And then I read the IG report, and I said, yeah, that's good. The way you went at it, you sort of basically laid all out how horrible this was.
Yeah.
And then I read the GSA's response, and I went through the roof.
Yeah.
As you just saw me do it, reenacting my going through the roof for the benefit of the radio show.
Yes.
That letter is just outrageous.
It's amazing.
And I know there's 18 million outrages.
Yeah, that's true.
So I get
it's hard
that.
To pick
this
one.
is just this is so shameless.
There's really no other way to describe it, and it's amazing that this sort of thing can still happen. That you just have people who are like, I won, or it's exculpatory. And no, it's not, and this is a huge problem for you. But and by the way, this is how you do things this is how you would stretch things out for that segment of Congress, and let's say this time Democrats in the House, for whom their chief goal is to avoid ever having to make a decision on impeachment. The White House will aid and abet that dodge by disputing every point of whether it's the Mueller report or impeachment articles or any sort of resolution of inquiry, point by point, no matter how facially ridiculous the dispute is. The first clause here, Mr. Chairman, says, whereas Donald J. Trump as President of the United States. We neither confirm nor deny the fact that Mr. Trump is currently acting as President of the United States. You're going to have to prove that one to us. What, are you kidding? It's in all the newspapers. I know, but do you have any paperwork on it? Yes, I have it right here. All right, well, in that case, we'll move on to clause 2. Okay, but 5 minutes have been wasted on that, or I would like a recess to review the paper. No, that's dumb. Well, I think I have that right. Fine, take 5 minutes to look at it. But everybody knows Trump is the president, and then come back an hour later. Where were you? You said it was a 5-minute recess. Oh, I had a phone call. I went to the bathroom. And just burn time doing dumb things in the hopes that you'll actually make it all the way to 2020. And just say, well, the election's tomorrow, so, we're going to have to put this impeachment thing off for a little while longer. They'll just contest everything. There's no reason not to. And there won't be any tomorrow or the next day either, because the person who wrote this response won't feel a thing. Unless, maybe Elijah Cummings it'll come to his attention and he'll roast the guy, and then it'll take 20 years under the Administrative Procedure Act to get rid of the guy, and a lawsuit ensues, but this is the way the wheels turn, I guess. And so I guess, but keep that in mind alongside Greg's reading of Yoni Applebaum's piece here. If you ever think impeachment will ever become warranted, if you're an impeachment doubter, but you entertain the possibility that public opinion can move, I can show you 1,000 ways, and this report and your explanation of it is an excellent example of this is the way they can make it take so long. If you insist on laying out everything first before you ask the Congress to do what? Lay it all out again?
That's a great
You will
point.
never get to it. You will never get to it, and you'll never be able to protect the country, and you'll never impeach it. And then he really could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, and that's what he meant. So there you have it.
Yeah,
I think we're on the way
that's
out.
actually, living through this thing and reading these things has been maybe we do just convene an impeachment committee.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only way to get to the answer, whatever it may be, while it's still relevant. Because the worst lawyers in the world can still cost you. Michael Cohen is literally the worst lawyer in the world. Rudy Giuliani, perhaps the second worst in the world. And we are 2 years into a unmasked banditry running the country. The guy's been looting the treasury, looting other countries' treasuries, selling the country out. Everybody's now asking him, they're actually asking him, are you a Russian agent? 2 years out of the 4 that we allot this. And we're like, well, I don't know, maybe we should wait for a report, and then we should analyze the report, and then we'll ask whether we analyzed the report correctly. And then we'll ask the House what they think about it, and then start the whole thing over again in the Senate. But don't worry about it. We're on top of things. We got this. We don't. Start now. Start today. Thank you, Armando, for adding yet another reason why it should have started yesterday.
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Okay. All right. Well, good. We'll work on it again tomorrow. And thanks for helping us out today. It was an interesting and insightful show. Talk to you again soon.
All right, man. Thank you.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All right, if you can stand even more, of course, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is up next with Justice Putnam. Man, let's see. There's Lindsey Graham discussion. There is Chef Jose Andres stepping back into the breach to discuss today, and much more, of course. Oh, and the T-Mobile story will come up last on the show coming up next.